Hey everybody, what's going on? Chris Arangio here for JR Cigars. New episode of the Long Ash podcast. We're going to be doing things a little bit different today. Nick and I, this past week, were on the road and we went to Kentucky for a special project that we will hopefully be able to reveal soon in the next few months. I don't want to say too much about it, but I do want to talk about our trip to Kentucky. Nick is not with me right now. He is in his hotel room grinding away at work, and I am in my hotel room recording the episode for you guys to listen to. It's going to be strictly audio. There's no visuals. We did get a chance to go to a cigar lounge in Indiana, which is only 10 minutes from where we're staying in Louisville, Kentucky. But we didn't have an opportunity to film a podcast this week, but we still want to get something to you. So it's going to probably be a little bit shorter, on the shorter side. And I'm just going to be going over our trip that we've been on. I am currently in Kentucky right now recording this. By the time it's released, I'll be home. But I just want to kind of give an overview of like things we did in Kentucky without, like I said, giving too much away, and just the overall experience so far. I haven't really traveled for work, for a work trip in quite some time. I'd go up to Connecticut to barn smokers here and there, like Drew Estate Barn Smoker. I went up to Nick Melillo, the Fields for Foundation Cigars. I've been able to go to his office. I think I was able to go twice. One in August of 22, and I think March or April of 23. I've been into the city New York City a handful of times to film some cigar events. Been to Florida. I went to Tampa Cigar Bash in 2019. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, I ended up going to, I've been able to do a few events. This one wasn't an event per se. Like I said, we were working on a special project with a distillery here in Kentucky, Bardstown, and I don't want to say anything else. I don't want to reveal any more information than I'm going to. But it was a really interesting experience. I'm not too familiar with bourbon or the bourbon industry, the distillery, or the wine and spirits industry. My father was a sommelier after he went to the FBI. He's a man of many talents, I suppose. But he says that the wine industry and the cigar industry are very similar in terms of the process of making, wine and cigars, and this, it's really the same with bourbon. We visited, Bardstown Bourbon Company, located in, I think, like 50 miles outside of, it's in Bardstown, Kentucky, which is 50 miles outside of Louisville. They've been around, I believe, since 2016, but they didn't make their first original blend until like 2023, which is kind of crazy to think about. I really enjoyed getting to know the guys over at Bardstown. We toured the facility. We saw they have upwards, I think, to like right now, 14 massive buildings where they're aging bourbon. They age their bourbon for up to 6 years. So anything that you have tried from them that is their original series was produced, started production in 2019 for that. And anything that's getting made today while we were here won't be ready until 2031. I'll be an old man by then. But yeah, it was a really, really interesting experience. I've been to Tennessee. I've also been to Tennessee for work, Nashville in 2021. I went to the relaunch of the Casa Monte Cristo store down there in Nashville, and also got to visit John Uber of Crown Heads. And that was an interesting city. I went to Nashville one other time for a bachelor party, and it definitely a very interesting city. Louisville, I feel like if you're looking to start a business, especially in the bourbon industry, but a business in general, I think Louisville would be a perfect location for it. We found out, because I guess I haven't looked at a map since I was like 15. We discovered that Louisville is very easy to get to other major cities within a day. Cincinnati, Ohio is only an hour and a half from Louisville. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, Indiana was literally over the bridge, 5-minute drive. Indianapolis is, I believe, an hour and 45 minutes from here. You have Atlanta, that's 7 hours. You have New Orleans, that's about 10 hours. Nashville's 2 hours from here. It's very easily accessible to a lot of places. Chicago, I believe, is 4 hours. So if you do a lot of traveling to major cities, Louisville would be, the spot to, I guess, live in if you are constantly traveling all over. The flight to Louisville to New Jersey is only 2 hours. The drive is about 10 hours. So it's very you can get to a lot of places from Louisville. It's vastly different from Nashville. Nashville, everyone called it Nash Vegas back in the day. It still has that reputation. It's a lot more touristy than I thought when I went 2 years ago. Louisville reminds me a lot, actually, where I lived in Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida. It reminded me a lot of that city. It's a big city, a lot of people in it, but the downtown area is very like docile and quiet, has a lot of great restaurants, has a lot of different restaurants. We chatted with one of the team members from Bardstown. His name is Brandon Smith, I believe. And he said, if you want Italian, here's a few places. If you want a few steakhouse, if you want to go to a steakhouse, here you go. You want some good sushi, here you go. It just seems like a very, wide variety of things to do. But yeah, when we drove out to Bardstown, it's very interesting. I've born and raised in New Jersey. Like I said, I lived in Florida for 5 or 6 years in my 20s. And then being back home in Jersey for the last 11 years, it's interesting to see just a different culture. I know we talked about it a few episodes ago where, different parts of the United States anyway, and the world, there's obviously different cultures, and especially in cuisine and lifestyle and whatnot. But on the way to Bardstown, we discovered there is a 16-mile radius in Kentucky where there's 11 distilleries. We passed by Jim Beam, and that was pretty cool to see. I think that's just like one of their locations, if I'm not mistaken. But Bardstown, they treated us very well, gave us a lot of access to their facility. We got to see processes of how bourbon is made. They obviously have their liquor license and they have a food license. So it's a distillery where they produce their bourbon, but then you can also go there and have lunch and dinner. And they have live music, I believe, in the summertime, and they have a gift shop. They have a tasting library. And the tasting library, they sell glasses by the ounce, and it can go anywhere from like $500 an ounce to maybe $3,000 an ounce, because there's some liquors they have in there that are very rare. I think they have like pre and post prohibition bottles in there. They have one whiskey bottle in there. I don't know the name, but it has on the back of the bottle instructions from a doctor to take a tablespoon every 3 hours of this, back in the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s. So it was very interesting to be around all that history. Made me nervous as hell to be in that room, because there's bottles that are probably worth more than my life in there, and God forbid you break it or damage it, drop it, But it was a very interesting experience we had this past week in Kentucky, because it is very, very similar to the cigar industry, and more similar than you would realize. The way they age their alcohol, the way they, aging their alcohol in barrels can be correlated to, hanging tobacco in a curating barn and letting it sit there for, a few months, half a year, full year. And just, there's one barn that they had, well, I call it a barn, but it was more of a building, where the front and back of the building was glass, like had glass windows on it. Other buildings didn't have that, but you can attribute that, with the glass walls, if you want to call it. They said that the weather here is it's really hot. If you've never been to Kentucky, like as I said, this is the first time I'm in Kentucky, so I'm discovering a lot. It's very warm, very, very warm in the summer. But I remember I had a friend of mine who listens to the podcast. He told me that like 2-3 weeks ago, they had like almost a foot of snow. So you get a mixture of seasons here. Luckily, when we were here, it was 65, 70 degrees during the day, 40 degrees at night. It was perfect. But I think the glass windows, with the sun going on some of these barrels, I mean, that has to affect the aging or add to the aging process of aging bourbon. And I asked one of the gentlemen who was giving us a tour, because the barn or the building was very cold, and it was colder inside the building than it was outside. And I asked him if it gets hot in these buildings, and he said, "Oh, in the summertime, it's really hot." And if you've ever been to a curing barn, it's almost kind of like the opposite. I've only ever been in curing barns when it's like in the middle of summer and, you know, the sun's beating down on you. And then when you go into a curing barn for tobacco, you have the leaves basically blocking, you know, hung up from the ceiling. So any sun that is being directed into the barns is really focused on the leaves, you know, the sun helping out the growth and the development of the leaves. Similar to, I guess, aging bourbon, you know, the weather inside these buildings, it really dictates how the aging process for bourbon, you know, because if it's hot, then the alcohol will, you know, expand into the wood. And I guess when it gets colder, you know, then that will seep out of the wood. And that's, you know, the aging process for, when you see barrel age, that's basically, you know, in a nutshell, what that is. But it was eerily similar to cigars. And I felt like that made Nick and I very comfortable in being able to talk with these guys. And, you know, so we kind of come from the same olive branch, so to speak. In you know, with certain terminologies that are similar to cigars. And it might not be, even if it's not the same terminology, it's still kind of like the same process of whether you're, you know, growing tobacco or whether you are aging bourbon. If you haven't checked out Bardstown, please, you know, check them out on social media. If they are sold in all 50 states across the United States, I was fortunate enough to try a few of them over the past week, and it's really smooth. We had some Nicaraguan puros throughout the trip, and they pair really well with that. A Toro size with a glass of bourbon. It just, the combination was flawless, honestly. I'm not a big bourbon drinker. You know, I would only really be drinking it to get drunk when I was in my youth, and I was always mixing it with soda, you know, which is, you know, basically bastardizing the bourbon. I know a lot of people drink bourbon differently, whether they drink it neat or with ice, or if they drink it in old fashioned. There's so many different ways to enjoy bourbon, but I drank it neat. And with the cigar, I was able to really maximize my smoking experience with it. And I felt like it was a really, really good pairing. And I never really pair bourbon, whiskey, any hard spirits or liquor. I'd never really pair it with cigars. I think it overtakes the flavor I'm trying to get from the cigar. I think it overpowers it. So I always try to have my cigar with coffee, Dr. Pepper, water. You know, you'll cleanse your palate. It'll be good for that. Another interesting thing about the distillery we went to is they are really, if you want, you know, to compare it to, is that they're very boutique. They're a boutique bourbon company. And to hear that before we got there was kind of astonishing, because they're sitting on like 400 acres of land. The amount of you know, usage they've had on their land, it's minuscule to compared to what they want to build and continue to grow. And, you know, they haven't even been around a decade. Yeah, Bardstown has also won a few awards, I believe, for some of their blends and barrel rolling contests, believe it or not, which is a thing out here in bourbon and whiskey country. The gentleman that we met with yesterday, he said Kentucky is the Silicon Valley for bourbon, and you didn't really think about it until you're out here and you see it. Even restaurants you go to, their bourbon selection is wild. It only makes sense because, like I just said, it's the Silicon Valley of bourbon, and, you know, the 60-mile radius with 11 different distilleries, that'll show you for sure that they're serious about their bourbon here. Funny little thing, I wish Nick was here for this. Nick and I are huge fans of Justified, the TV series that was on a few years ago. And Harlan, Kentucky was where the show's based in. So Nick, like the first day we got here and we met with the people from Bardstown, we were like, so how far is Harlan from here? And I think it was about, I want to say anywhere between 45 to an hour away from where we were at in Bardstown. And the gentleman who was giving us a tour basically said, I used to live in Harlan, Kentucky when I first moved here, and it was not filmed in Harlan at all. It was filmed in Georgia, California, like most things are filmed in. But Harlan is, like he said, like, you know, in a few episodes where they would be downtown Harlan or at the bank for the one scene where Timothy Olyphant's character had to blow up the bank. That was not in there at all. It's a really quaint, quiet little town. So we were, well, not disappointed, but we were thinking about going to big, hey, let's do a road trip there and see. Nick kept saying too, if we came here in the fall, we could have just hopped on a road trip to Cincinnati to watch Joe Burrow play, which I would love to see. But we had some time to explore both Louisville, and as I mentioned earlier, we were only like 5 or 10 minutes away from a small town in Indiana. We went to a cigar lounge there called Match. Really, really cool little cigar lounge. Attached to it was a cigar shop that looked like they had cigars from Monte Cristo, Drew Estate, Perdomo, Padron. And next to it was a nice little bar where they were selling a lot of bourbon, and we were able to have a few glasses of Bardstown, like I said, with the cigar, and that was really nice. But it was just a nice, cool little vibe. It was quiet. It wasn't, there wasn't a lot of people there. The weather was beautiful. They had outside seating. They had patio seating, so maybe everyone was outside smoking since the weather's beautiful. But you get the same vibe, every cigar lounge I've been to, cigar shop I've been to, and for the most part, you get the same friendly vibe from the shop owner, from customers there talking to you about what you're smoking and what cigars you like smoking. It's really nice to see, you can kind of go anywhere in the country and stop into a cigar shop and it's like you're home, right? It's like you feel like you're right at home. I've been to a lot of cigar shops in New Jersey and they all have that vibe, but to go somewhere completely different, and the one common denominator is that you guys love smoking cigars, Another cool thing Nick and I did before we headed home was we stopped at Churchill Downs. Didn't realize it was kind of like in the middle of, I don't want to say, it's not really in the middle of nowhere, but it seems a little misplaced for Louisville. I don't know how else to say it. Nick and I both thought like it would be, 30 or 40 miles outside the city and like the fields where, Bardstown was and all that. It's right out on the outskirts of downtown, right off the highway. It's right next to the football stadium where the University of Louisville baseball field and football field are. So it's like its own little sort of sports complex. But it was really interesting. We didn't get to go inside Churchill Downs. It was fun seeing from outside the stadium the press boxes where everyone sits, and just so much history there. We walked into a casino in Louisville that was right around the corner from our hotel, and they had all the Triple Crown winners on like the wall in the casino. I thought that was really, really interesting. And when you show up to the Louisville airport, and I noticed this with Nashville as well, but you show up to Louisville airport, they have a TV screen of like people who are from Louisville. So like if anyone knows who Jack Harlow is, a rapper, they were basically like, you can visit Churchill Downs, or I didn't know this is how I'm an idiot, the Louisville Slugger Museum is here. And then another friend of mine mentioned that there's a Muhammad Ali museum here as well. You think that's that's pretty cool. One of the greatest of all time in boxing came from this city. Newark Airport in New Jersey. I guess I'll have to check it out when I travel back. I don't know if they're like have any like cool attractions. Like I just saw a big Rutgers logo sign, like that was like a stand that they made out of that for when you're going to your gate. But even when I went to Nashville, they had like, welcome to Nashville with a Johnny Cash picture. And in the airport, I believe behind like glass cases, they have, I think some of Elvis's outfits. They have some of Johnny Cash's guitar. They really make you feel like welcome to Nashville when you get there, or Tennessee when you get there, because of, the music, the rich music history that comes from that state. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's going to be a shorter episode, which I apologize, no video as well. But it was a really interesting experience. I wish I could discuss more about why we came here, but I swear in the next few months you will know, you will be seeing content on our channel of our trip here. It was a really interesting experience. I've never done a trip like this for work. Like I said, it was always been to events, to tobacco fields in Connecticut, events in the city, events in Florida. This was a different experience. It was nice kind of not stepping out of the cigar world for a bit, but seeing a different side of, at the end of the day, cigars are hobbies, right? We all love smoking a cigar. Some of it, like myself, it's a job for us, right? But a hobby, and people love to sit down after a long day of work or relax on the weekend and have a cigar and a bourbon. So kind of seeing the cigar's right-hand man or right-hand beverage of choice, seeing how that got made and created, and just the similarities really was a shock and awe for me. Because you don't, like I said, I'm a fan of bourbon. I will drink it if it's there, but I don't know like the history of it. I don't know the process of it. I'm not a a bourbon nerd, and I don't say nerd in a negative connotation at all, because I feel like I'm a cigar nerd, sports nerd, movie nerd, but I don't know bourbon enough. And even some of the people we met, they didn't necessarily know cigars, but just talking with them, you just saw like how we were able to like just, connect and be like, oh, this is kind of under the same umbrella. And it's just really cool to see. I think it opened up my eyes to, a whole new avenue of doing cigar pairings or what bourbons pair well with certain cigars. And it was a neat experience. It was really neat. I always love going to a different city or a different part of the country and kind of seeing where this universally loved product being produced and just seeing the passion from the people working on it, how humble they are. Because I think sometimes within the cigar business and any other business you see, there's not a lot of, humility there. It's nice being around people who are humble and like are doing something they absolutely love, and being able to do it as your job. That's a really, really important thing. Yeah, it was a blast. I'm really excited for the next coming months to show you guys the content that we created from this trip. It was something I'm not going to forget. I was really glad I was able to come on this trip and see for myself, what we've been working on. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. And I'm not just saying that. I think it's going to be something for everyone who loves cigars and bourbon. I think this project we're working on is going to be right up your guys' alley. And we're really excited for you to see it. Make sure to please comment, like, and subscribe on all our channels, our TikTok, our YouTube, Spotify. Next week, we will be back with video with both Nick and I. And yeah, keep listening, keep supporting. We appreciate everyone who listens and supports. And until next time, I'll fill in for Nick. Keep it lit.